Imagine a machine that, you push it exactly once and it never ever stops spinning. Like it just keeps going.
Right, the ultimate holy grail of engineering.
Exactly. It powers your house, your city forever. And, well, for centuries, scientists have called this a complete fairy tale, like the ultimate cosmic impossibility.
Because thermodynamics always wins, right? Put
Yeah.
energy in, you get energy out, and you always, always lose a little bit to friction or heat.
Yeah, it's like the universe's tax.
Mhm.
But the mission for this deep dive today is to look at a highly detailed proposal that claims to have found a loophole.
And it is a very specific, very intricate loophole.
It really is. We have a fascinating stack of sources today. It's a comprehensive Arabic research document by a creator named Mostafa Mohamed Abdullah Sherif from the Maelsh Pro team. And it comes with 4 incredibly intricate visual schematics.
Which is great because visualizing this thing is half the battle.
Definitely. So we're going to unpack this specific proposal, try to visualize its complex mechanics, and understand exactly how its creator claims to have beaten the laws of thermodynamics.
And, whether you listening are a strict physics traditionalist, maybe an engineer, or honestly just insanely curious learner, this material is such a captivating exercise in mechanical logic.
It really forces you to think.
It does. We are looking at raw open source engineering here. So we are going to impartially examine the claims, the math, and the mechanics precisely as the author has presented them. Just walking through the logic of how this machine supposedly creates its own continuous momentum.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around the machine, we have to start with the foundational philosophy driving the invention. The author completely challenges the standard understanding of how energy should be harvested.
Right, they start with a very basic observation. Everything in the universe is either already balanced or it's actively trying to reach a state of balance.
Like reaching equilibrium.
Exactly. Equilibrium is the baseline state of nature. So, if you have a rock on top of a hill, it has potential energy, but nature wants it at the bottom of the hill, at rest. And when something is out of balance, it releases energy to reach that equilibrium state. You see this when you break chemical bonds for nuclear energy, or, even just when a coiled spring unwinds.
So it's releasing energy to get back to a neutral state.
Yes. And the author's foundational rule for this entire machine is built on this exact premise. Quote, break the balance, you get energy.
Break the balance, you get energy. Which, makes total sense on a surface level. But traditional perpetual motion machines always fail because of how gravity actually works in standard physics.
Right, because gravity is a conservative field.
Yeah, a conservative field. I always picture it kind of like a roller coaster. The energy the car takes to climb that very first massive hill is the absolute maximum energy it has to power through the rest of the track.
You don't just get free speed later on.
No, gravity doesn't hand out free rides. The energy you use to lift an object is exactly equal to the kinetic energy you gain when it falls back down. So what goes up must come down, and you don't get extra momentum out of nowhere.
The zero-sum game of physics.
Exactly. So if gravity is a conservative field, how does the author think they can just bypass that zero-sum game?
Well, the author's goal isn't necessarily to cheat gravity. It's to build a closed system machine that never reaches equilibrium in the first place.
Wait, never reaches equilibrium?
Right. The premise is that by using a highly specific rotating geometry, you can create a state of permanent asymmetry. The machine is essentially designed to constantly trick gravity into pulling down on a side that is always intentionally heavier.
Oh, I see. So you never let the roller coaster actually reach the bottom of the hill.
Exactly. You just keep shifting the shape of the hill itself so the car is always falling.
Always falling. Okay, permanent asymmetry. So to see how you trick gravity into a permanent fall, we have to look at the macro structure of this machine.
The housing for the whole thing.
Yeah, the author calls it the mother wheel. Looking at the schematic titled Mother Wheel Design Corrected.png, it is a massive piece of hardware.
It looks heavy, just from the drawings.
Very heavy. It features these huge front and rear steel A-frame support stands, and the entire wheel is elevated so it never actually touches the ground.
But the most crucial detail in that schematic is what is noticeably absent. There are absolutely no internal wheel bearings.
Right, which is weird for a wheel.
Yeah, in a standard wheel or turbine, you have a central axle with bearings taking all the rotational friction. But here, the central core remains completely open.
It's essentially hollow. The inner wheels are kind of sandwiched together using outer perimeter rods and these rigid connecting rods.
So where does it spin?
Well, the bearings that allow the whole thing to spin are located exclusively out in those massive A-frame stands. So the weight is suspended purely on these two outer points, like a giant metal sandwich just hanging there.
Which is a deliberate design choice. They want to distribute the massive weight of the machine to the outermost, most stable points while drastically reducing the mechanical friction that would normally occur at a central axle.
Because friction is the enemy here.
Oh, absolutely. When you are dealing with a machine attempting to maintain perpetual motion, internal friction is public enemy number one. Pushing the rotation points to the perimeter helps minimize that energy loss.
Okay, so we have this massive, freely spinning, elevated wheel with a hollow core. But, I mean, a Ferris wheel eventually stops turning.
Sure, air resistance alone will do that.
Yeah, even with reduced friction on the perimeter, air resistance and the bearings themselves will slow it down unless a motor is actively driving it. The outer frame just holds it up. So what actually makes this thing spin on its own?
Well, the mother wheel is just the housing. The actual unbalance, that permanent asymmetry we talked about, happens in the inner layer.
The sandwich filling.
The sandwich filling, exactly. The author calls this the radial fluid distributor. If you look at the schematic showing how all the parts work, you see the true heart of the machine.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It looks like a massive metal gear with a star pattern of these bright blue tubes radiating out from the center. It almost looks like the veins of a circulatory system.
That's a good way to describe it. Those blue tubes connect the micro-components located along the outer edges of the wheel. The sources refer to these as S-pendulums.
S-pendulums.
Yeah. Inside the wheel, mounted along the circumference, are these isolated mechanisms. Each pendulum system consists of two opposite cylindrical containers, one positioned on one side of the wheel and the other on the exact opposite side.
And they cross through the middle.
Yes, they are connected directly to each other by an S-shaped tube that crosses right through that hollow center of the wheel we mentioned earlier.
Okay, and inside these cylindrical containers is where the actual fluid comes in. There is a blue accordion-like bellows.
A bellows, yeah.
I think of it as a flexible, heavy-duty bag that can be crushed and expanded, and it's filled entirely with water.
Just regular water.
Yeah, the author notes they chose water simply because it's easily accessible, cheap, and very easy to measure in a laboratory setting.
That makes sense for an open source test. Now, in a standard hydraulic cylinder, you would use a motorized piston rod to push fluid out of a chamber. But this design completely eliminates the motorized rod.
So how does it push the water?
The traditional piston is replaced by a free-floating solid iron weight located inside the cylindrical container. It just rests right up against the water-filled bellows.
It's basically like having two heavily weighted juice boxes connected by a long, curly straw. If you crush one juice box, the liquid shoots through the straw and inflates the box on the other side.
That visualizes the mechanism perfectly.
Okay, but hold on. I've tried siphoning water before. I've played with fluids in tubes. It takes a massive amount of effort to squeeze heavy water up a tube against the force of gravity.
It really does.
So if there's no electrical motor plugging this thing into a wall, what is actually forcing that solid iron weight to crush the bellows and push the water upward?
This is where the author introduces their geometric logic. Gravity itself is the motor doing the squeezing.
Gravity is the motor. Okay, walk me through that.
Let's trace a single container as the mother wheel turns. Imagine one of these cylindrical containers is currently at the very bottom of the wheel, at the 6 o'clock position.
Okay, bottom of the wheel.
As the wheel rotates, that container rides up the circumference toward the 12 o'clock position.
So it's traveling upside down relative to its starting point.
Exactly. As it goes over the top and starts to descend, the orientation of the container physically flips.
Oh, because it's attached to the wheel.
Right. And because of that flip, the heavy, solid iron weight inside the cylinder suddenly finds itself positioned directly above the blue accordion bellows.
And then gravity takes over.
Gravity takes over. That heavy iron weight drops straight down. And as it drops, it physically crushes the blue bellows underneath it.
What?
That immense downward pressure forces the water out of the bellows, through the S-tube, and injects it into the ascending container on the exact opposite side of the wheel.
So the container riding up the other side is getting filled with water, making it heavier, while the one going down is emptying.
Well, actually, it's the other way around. The container that just flipped at the top injects its water into the container that's currently at the bottom. So the heavy water is always shifting to the side that's about to travel downward.
Oh, I see. But moving fluid around is one thing. Doing it fast enough and forcefully enough to keep a massive steel wheel spinning requires incredibly precise math. It's not just a concept drawing, right? The author actually provides the physical calculations to back this up.
They do. They are completely transparent about the physics required to make this theoretical squeeze happen. The iron piston's weight can't just be some random heavy block.
It has to be specific.
Highly specific. It must be perfectly calculated to overcome three very specific opposing forces. First is the water column, which is the physical height and weight of the water being pushed vertically up the S-tube against gravity.
That sounds like a lot of resistance.
It is. Second is the natural viscosity of the fluid itself resisting movement through the tube. And third is the physical friction of the accordion bellows expanding and compressing, plus the friction of the iron weight sliding inside its cylinder walls.
And the text gives us a mathematical example to anchor this in reality. They say, imagine a wheel that is 2 meters in diameter.
Pretty good sized wheel.
Yeah, big enough. The fluid vessels have a 15-centimeter diameter, and the S-pendulums are tilted at a specific 45-degree angle.
Okay.
In that scenario, the water column resistance is calculated at 736.8 units. To overcome that specific resistance and successfully crush the bellows, the required iron piston weight needs to be roughly 37.755 units.
Right, and whenever we see units presented this way in an open-source engineering document, it is generally indicating a proportional ratio rather than an absolute measurement like pounds or kilograms.
Okay, so it's a ratio.
Yes. The author is demonstrating the necessary mathematical ratio of the driving force relative to the resistance force. The downward vector of the iron weight must exceed the combined resistance of the fluid column and mechanical friction by a specific margin.
To make sure it actually pushes the water.
Exactly. To ensure the fluid transfers completely before the wheel rotates past the optimal angle.
That explains why the pendulums are tilted at 45 degrees. It maximizes the downward force of the weight while still allowing the container to flip properly as the wheel turns.
And to ensure continuous unbroken motion, the machine doesn't just rely on one of these S-pendulums.
Right, one wouldn't be enough.
No, it uses 4 of them, spaced evenly around the wheel at 0, 45, 90, and 135 degrees.
That timing must be crucial.
The timing created by that spacing is fundamental to the author's claim of perpetual torque. Because of this exact 45-degree offset, at any given microsecond of the wheel's rotation, the 4 pendulums are performing 4 distinct tasks.
Which are?
One is resting. One is actively transferring fluid through its S-tube. One is fully loaded with water on the downward trajectory, providing maximum positive downward torque to turn the wheel. And the final one is acting as a counterbalance on the opposite side.
Okay, I hear the math. I can visualize the geometry of the heavy water always shifting to the downward side. But, AI models, traditional physicists, and literally anyone who has taken a thermodynamics class is going to look at this and point out the obvious flaw.
The closed system problem.
Yes, it is still a closed system. Gravity doesn't forget. The energy used by gravity to drop the iron piston and push the water has to be accounted for.
Energy has to come from somewhere.
Right, the friction of the water moving, the friction of the bellows, all of that has to sap energy from the wheel's rotation. Eventually, the wheel won't have enough momentum to lift the water back up to the top. The whole system just has to grind to a halt and reach that equilibrium we talked about at the very beginning.
That is the standard physics response. And the author fully anticipates this exact critique from the scientific community. They know thermodynamics laws point toward zero net energy in a closed loop.
So how do they defend it?
They provide a highly specific defense, arguing that critics mistakenly blend internal and external forces when evaluating this specific rotating geometry.
Okay, what does blending internal and external forces actually mean in this context? How does that solve the energy tax?
According to the source document, the internal forces, like the iron weight dropping and squeezing the fluid through the tube, are physically isolated from the wheel's rotational forces.
Isolated how?
The author argues that when the massive mother wheel rotates 180 degrees, the container mechanically flips, purely due to the angular momentum of the heavy water-filled side falling. That flipping motion resets the heavy iron weight back to the top of the container.
So it resets on its own.
The claim is that this reset happens essentially as a byproduct of the wheel's overall rotation.
Wait, they are saying the wheel's momentum flips the container, lifting the iron weight back up to the top of the chamber without needing an internal motor to pull it up.
That's the claim.
But lifting that iron weight back up against gravity still requires energy. Even if it's a byproduct, it should act as a brake on the wheel's rotation, right? It should slow it down.
The author's counter to that is that the fluid is always being forced to the downward moving side of the wheel before the container has to travel up the ascending side.
Okay.
Because the downward side is constantly artificially heavier than the upward side, it creates a continuous external positive torque.
So it's pulling harder than it's braking.
Exactly. The claim is that the gravitational pull on this artificially heavier side is so strong that it easily overcomes the minor braking effect of flipping the internal pistons. It's an argument that the geometry of the path literally changes the integral of the force.
So the shape itself is doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah, the fluid shifting creates a massive imbalance, and that imbalance powers the rotation, which powers the flip, which powers the fluid shift. It is a self-feeding loop based on an ever-shifting center of gravity.
I mean, that is an incredibly bold claim to make to a physicist. You are basically saying, I found a shape that makes gravity work against itself.
It's a huge paradigm shift if true.
Yeah. And usually when someone claims to have invented perpetual motion or free energy, it's shrouded in intense secrecy. You hear about hidden blueprints, locked lab doors, or, conspiracy theories that major energy corporations are trying to suppress their work.
They want you to buy their book first.
Right, or they demand millions of dollars before they even show anyone a prototype. But this source takes the exact opposite approach. This is an open source challenge to the entire world.
The transparency is a highly unusual aspect of this source material. The creator explicitly states that the machine currently exists in a digital simulation. And they don't just post a cool-looking video of the simulation.
What'd they do?
They actually provide the GitHub repository links and a Zenodo digital object identifier.
A Zenodo DOI. So for those listening who might not spend all their time in academic databases, a Zenodo DOI is basically a permanent digital vault where scientists and researchers share their raw data, code, and findings for public scrutiny.
You can't fake a Zenodo link.
No, you can't. It means the raw code of their physics simulation is sitting right there, waiting for literally anyone to download it and poke holes in it.
And they go further than just digital files. They also state that a physical, real-world version of the mother wheel is actively under construction.
So they are building it.
Yes. The author is asking engineers and physicists to download the data, run the numbers, and build the machine themselves to prove it wrong.
Wow.
The only caveat they provide for the physical build is that engineers must use high-quality materials and not mechanically overload the machine beyond its specified ratios.
Which makes sense because that would introduce artificial outside friction that the pendulums aren't calibrated to overcome.
Exactly.
I mean, they are really throwing the gauntlet down. They're saying, here's the code, here are the exact measurements and the mathematical ratios. Please try to break it. And they aren't trying to lock this behind a massive corporate patent wall either, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
The stated purpose for this invention is surprisingly expansive. The author allows free use of this design for public or private benefit, provided it is strictly used for peaceful purposes.
Okay, peaceful purposes only.
Right. If an entity wants to commercialize it and sell it for profit, they do require direct permission. But the overarching goal explicitly stated in the document is purely to serve humanity by providing a source of clean, permanent energy.
And they even quote a verse from the Quran, Surah Fatir, attributing the inspiration for the idea to divine mercy. And, we are just impartially reporting their author's exact words and motivations here. But including a religious text in a mechanical engineering schematic really highlights how deeply personal and universally minded this project is for the creator.
It's not standard engineering practice.
No, this isn't about getting a secret patent and becoming a tech billionaire. It's about putting a radical idea into the wild to see if it can fundamentally change human access to energy.
And returning to the scientific method, the author makes a plea for what they call a neutral test.
A neutral test.
Yes, they're asking the global engineering community to build the physical machine and measure the torque step by step, empirically. They want people to observe the physical reality of the shifting center of gravity, rather than just dismissing the design outright because it appears to violate a preconceived theoretical law.
Give it a fair shot.
Exactly. It is a fundamental request for hands-on verification and critical thinking over immediate theoretical dismissal.
Which really is what science is supposed to be all out. Testing a physical world even when the theories on the chalkboard tell you it shouldn't work.
Precisely.
Well, we started today looking at a philosophy of breaking natural balance to harvest energy. We visualized the massive hollow-core mother wheel suspended entirely on outer A-frames to eliminate central friction.
The giant metal sandwich.
Yes, the sandwich. We walked through the mechanics of those S-pendulums, visualizing how gravity-fed iron weights could crush fluid bellows, pushing heavy water against gravity simply by letting the wheel flip them upside down.
And we examine the complex math, attempting to prove that this constant shifting of weight creates enough positive downward torque to power its own rotation indefinitely.
And finally, we looked at the completely open, transparent challenge to the global scientific community to download the code, build the machine, and test the physics for themselves.
It's a comprehensive argument. The creator moves from abstract thermodynamic philosophy all the way down to the specific proportional weights of iron pistons and the fluid dynamics of water moving through an S-tube.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but whether it ultimately stands up to real-world friction or not, it forces you to deeply engage with the actual mechanics of kinetic energy.
It forces you to rethink how we apply the rules we've been taught, because standard physics dictates that a closed system must inevitably grind to a halt. We've built our whole modern world, our entire understanding of engines and power grids, on that very assumption.
We rely on it.
We do, but this precise geometric arrangement claims to constantly shift its own center of gravity, effectively using gravity's constant downward pull against itself to create an endless loop. And it makes you wonder, if you listen, think about it, what if human innovation isn't always about breaking the fundamental laws of physics?
No, if it's about bending them.
Or what if it's rather about finding the undiscovered geometric loopholes hiding right in plain sight within those laws? What other supposedly impossible technologies might just be waiting for the exact right shape to unlock them?